first speaker on the opposition.
Rather thankful for that intrusion. I'm sure the member from Calgary West is now awake. In any case, let's drive right into the government case for you before we present the opposition case, which is going to be based on three main pillars. Firstly, the issue of the rights of the fat. Secondly, specialization, and finally, choice. But before we delve right into that, let's take a look at the government case today and look at what they've brought to us thus far. So, in response to a POI by my partner, the government admitted to us that they think children's attitudes towards health and wellness are most impacted when they're at a very young age. We think in this way that they've already undercut their own model and shown that their model isn't going to be effective, because we're talking about high schools here, first of all. But what they went then furthermore went on to show is that obesity is not a problem that can be solved by PE. Unfortunately, physical education being compulsory does not affect the price of Big Macs, and Big Macs will still be cheap. So what we see in opposition, and this is rather a societal problem that government has ignored and taken a short-sighted approach to, a naive approach to, that I'll take you in a moment. So rather, in any case,
yeah, sure. Big Macs will still be cheap, kids will still be lazy, but this is still the best way for the government to help to counteract the health and obesity problem as it applies to children and teenagers.
We actually think that this is not the best way for the government to handle the issue. There are a lot of different ways you can attack obesity, but we're going to be showing you today on opposition why specifically this actually hinders the ability of government to reduce obesity and specifically turns children off of physical education. In any case, we're going to get into that in a little bit. So what we see overall is that the distinction between high school and a very young age is really important. It's about 15 years. And we think children's attitudes towards healthy eating, towards exercise, are formed in their infancy, in their youth, rather than when they're 16 years old. And what we see is that if you have unhealthy eating habits, if you're eating a bunch of Big Macs every day because they're cheaper than vegetables, running a little bit is not going to solve that. Exercise and healthy eating are a combination that can't just be solved with one of them. So ultimately, the government attitude, their whole case has been underlined by the idea that they can actually solve obesity with their model, which we think is actually impossible, because parental attitudes are much more important. In any case, let's take a look at the first two pillars on side opposition today, which are going to be firstly that of equality and the attitudes towards PE, and secondly that of specialization. So let's take a look at that first idea of rights and equality. So what we're going to bring forward today in opposition is that it is possible to be a really smart person, but also really obese. And that we don't think it's right that those individuals should be held back from universities under the government plan. We don't think it's right that those individuals should be prevented a chance to get a good job in life, to maybe invent something nice for society, because they're obese, yes.
So you'd agree that the only value in our society is with intelligence?
Not that the only value in our society is with intelligence, but government would say that you're only valuable to society if you're fit. So we disagree with that as well. There are multiple ways in which an individual can be valuable for society. But the point here is that the government policy looks at only one of those ways, underscores it as the most important, and then ignores intelligence entirely. So moving on. Smart and fat is a possible combination. And essentially we've seen that the government has hung the career of students, hung their university education on their ability to lose weight. And that's a tough thing. Losing weight is a difficult issue. Some obesity is genetic, for example. And we don't think we want to hold back people because of their genetics. No, thank you. If you have genetic obesity, we don't think it's right that you lose your career prospects because you can't lose your weight. We don't think you give up one when you give up the quest to lose weight. So overall, what we see in this idea of equality and rights, and this first subpoint here of the first contention about rights, is that individuals should not lose opportunities because of their weight. We think government's been really short-sighted in ignoring this issue. Now, furthermore, we think this mandatory compulsory, that's redundant, this compulsory physical education actually harms the ability of individuals to become fit later in life. And let's hear why. So, we all know teenagers are fairly rebellious, and that physical education can be quite the, if you will, embarrassing experience. If you're not good at dodgeball, you're going to come away not only with a bruised body, but a bruised ego. And you are going to forever associate physical education with that bruised ego, with that physical pain. And furthermore, the whole nature of compulsoriness with teenagers is that they will attempt to eschew any sort of authority telling them to do anything if it's compulsory. They don't like because I said so as a reader. So ultimately, we don't think these teenagers, if they actually do try and somehow manage to barely pass the exam, so we're sure that's all the effort they put in, are going to get much out of this in any case, because they're going to come away with physical and mental scars with PE from being forced to do it for them. Now secondly, let's look into this idea of specialization, the second contention we're bringing forward to you on opposition today. So what we see in the world, we saw analysis from government about other places undercutting, or overdoing math scores compared to North America. That essentially Canada and the United States were losing the education race to countries like China and Japan. Countries like China and Japan don't focus nearly as much as we do in North America on sports when it comes to school. A lot of them don't even have school sports teams. So when they try to tell you that the Chinese focus a lot more on education and that's why they're all doing way better at math, it's wrong. It's because they have a culture of schooling where they go for 12 hours to school every day and study for 9 hours. But maybe that's an overdoing it. But they study for a long time at night. Is the point? Maybe not that. But the point is that this issue is not due to physical education. But the reason we're losing in North America is not that we haven't taken enough time out of science classes and math classes to go run around for a while and then pass a government health check. The reason we're losing the math and science race in North America is because we aren't doing enough math and science. We see that the world is becoming increasingly specialized. If you imagine the sphere of human knowledge as a literal sphere, what happens is you start out in the center knowing very little. You go to high school, push the boundaries a little. When you get a PhD, you have pushed the boundary of human knowledge this much. You have expanded the circle yay much, but only in a little bump, not the entire circle. It's the nature of knowledge in the 21st century. There are no more Leonardo da Vinci's. There are no more jacks of all trades. The case is that you take one science, or two sciences for the most part, through high school. And you take those two sciences all through high school and focus as much as you can on them so that you can increase the boundaries of human knowledge so you can get a job one day because the world is becoming so specialized. And what government ignores in their plan is this specialization and how important it is. And it's that ultimately China and Japan recognize the need for specialization. They recognize that you need to be set on a specific path throughout school. They recognize that you can't waste time in school if you want to get ahead. If you want doctors, lawyers, university entrance graduates, you can't take away from class time with silly running around and passing a government health test. In any case, what have we shown you today? What we've shown you is that the government failed to consider how their own scheme works. That high school is far too late to reach students. That when you force physical education to weigh on people's careers, to make them have the choice between specializing themselves and getting a good career, or between not being fat if they can achieve thinness, slimness, what you do is you harm them. You harm their rights, you affect them personally. And furthermore, we showed you that the reason that China and Japan are winning the education race is not because they spend time on PE, it's because they specialize a lot better than we do.